Welcome to Hardly Initiated. It is your host, Tyshawn Jackson, in here with my co-host, Ryan Ketchens. And tonight, family, we're about to nerd out.
Facts.
A little bit. All right, so get ready. This is going to be a fascinating conversation on Hardly Initiated, as we have found a world-renowned scientist, Dr. James Tour. He's going to tell us about how he has actually transitioned in his faith from Judaism to Christ, and also how his career as a scientist actually strengthened his faith. Let's get into it.
Man, when did they add all that bass to the intro music, man?
Absolutely. We was bumping in that intro.
Right.
Welcome to Hardly Initiated, family. We are here again. All my initiates, drop ready in the chat if you're ready for tonight's show.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one, man. So it's funny because when I found James Tour, I'm like, okay, we got to get this guy on the platform. But before we do, we're going to have to study up because it's too much complex information.
Absolutely.
So we didn't even know how to title the video, how to do the thumbnails. Me and Ty are usually good at that. But we literally, I believe, are talking to really the smartest person we've ever interviewed on the platform.
No shade to our last
No shade. No, yeah, this is not
no
shade.
Shade.
This
no
is not
shade.
I mean, this is facts.
But it's a facts, though. And just based on publications, because let me give you guys a proper introduction, because this might be your first time being introduced to Dr. James, to Dr. Tour right here. And what I want to do here, if it is, I got to make sure you understand what's about to happen.
Go ahead and pull him up, Lano.
For those of you who do not know Dr. James Tour, Dr. James Tour here has a PhD in organic chemistry. He's been voted one of the top 50 influential minds in the world. Okay, he has spoken at every major university in the country. He has over 650 documented research publications, guys. Voted R&D Magazine's Scientist of the Year. Has challenged some of the most popular scholars in the world. And today, he's on Hardly Initiated. So everybody give a warm welcome to Dr. James Tour. Welcome to Hardly Initiated.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Glad to have you.
Dr. James Tour is chill.
He's
so chill.
He real zen. He done found the Lord. That's why he's so zen like that. So we trying to get like you. But really quick before we get started, Dr. Tour, I want to let you guys know we are back live every Monday and Wednesday at 8. So please make sure to like and hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, don't forget to go holler at Dr. James Tour on his YouTube platform, which is growing exponentially. And of course, which is the reason I found him. So please, all you got to do is click the link in the title. It'll take you straight over to his channel. And guys, we just launched a second YouTube channel. We're getting ready to get into our 5th episode tomorrow evening, where we are doing a singles check-in on Hardly in Love, which is a spinoff of the Hardly Initiated channel. So if you are interested in everything dating, everything about being single, everything about, connecting and getting to know new people, please click the link in the description and subscribe to Hardly in Love. I promise you'll love it. And tonight, as always, we are reading all super chats that are over $10, and I'm sure you guys are going to have some questions and concerns for Dr. James. So all you got to do is send over your super chat, and we will make sure they get addressed tonight.
I love bringing our scholars here, guys. Y'all know we've brought so many spiritual leaders here, pastors, speakers, and all of this sorts. But I've been in a season personally where I've been really studying a lot of the biblical scholars. And if you guys also like the episode where we bring the scholars on, just put me in the chat. I really want to see how that's impacting and have an effect on your life, your growth, your faith, because that's the purpose of these episodes. The first thing I want you to do, though, is to get a relationship and better understand Dr. Tour, as he has a really incredible background in his story coming to Christ. Because I just learned this now. Dr. Tour, you grew up in what will be described as a secular Jewish home, and it's actually a big deal when you decide to call Christ Messiah,
Right.
based on the family and belief that you come from. So can you walk us through a bit of how you grew up in your home and, you know, how you actually came to Christ? Walk us through that.
Okay, well, I was born in New York City, right there in Manhattan. I grew up just north of the city, and I was a secular Jew, meaning that we were ethnically Jewish, but we only went to synagogue maybe twice a year, so I wasn't really into the Judaism. It's like many times Christians will say they're Christians, they grow up in a Christian home, but they don't go to church, and they don't do much beyond that other than Christmas and maybe Easter. And that's kind of how I was as a Jew. But when I went to college, a young man shared with me the gospel. We got to talking. I said, "What do you want to do when you graduate?" I was just a freshman and trying to make friends, and he was a sophomore. He said, "I want to probably be a missionary." And I thought, a missionary? I'd never met a missionary before. I didn't even know they existed. I thought American Indians had killed them all off. I didn't know about missionaries. And he said, "Could I give you an illustration of the gospel?" I didn't even know what he meant. And I said, "Yeah, go ahead." And he gave me a story about Jesus. And he opened up to a verse in Romans, and it says, "All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." I said, "I haven't sinned. I'm not a sinner." And I said, "I never killed anybody. I never robbed a bank. How could I be a sinner?" In modern secular Judaism, little things aren't sin, and it's only big things. And then he opened to Matthew 5:28, and Jesus said, "I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart." And that one just really hit me hard, because at the age of 14, I was working in a gas station on the highway just outside the city. And there was one on the northbound side, one on the southbound side. And my job as a 14-year-old was to clean the parking lots and clean the restrooms. And I started finding these magazines, and I became addicted to pornography at the age of 14. There was no
Wow.
internet back then. And by the age of 18, I was deeply addicted, but we didn't share our problems back in those days. You know, now people share all sorts of problems. They'll even say, "I'm going to go see my therapist today," or something. I mean, nobody ever would have said that. They'd have thought you're crazy. And so I never told anybody about this addiction, and then I was really convicted all of a sudden for the first time in my life. And I knew about adultery. That's one of the 10 commandments for Jews. How could I commit adultery? I'm not married, and how can I commit adultery in my heart? I mean, adultery is a physical thing, but Jesus is always trying to get a hold of our heart. But the thing about Jesus is his words. When he's trying to get a hold of your heart, they have enormous power. So this young man had my attention. He took me through the gospel message, and I just couldn't get it off my mind that I'm a sinner. Because it says, if you look at a woman with lust for her, I didn't know how to look at a woman any other way. That's the only way I knew. And I went a few more months, and then one day I was in my room all alone, and I got on my knees. And I'm not even sure why I got on my knees, because most Jews, we stand when we pray, and most Christians I had seen were sitting when they prayed. And I got on my knees and I said, "Lord, forgive me, because I am a sinner." And all of a sudden, I felt this amazing peace of God just start filling the room. And then right over to my right, Jesus is standing. And it wasn't an optical thing, it wasn't an auditory thing, but presence of God, presence of Jesus was so strong. And I don't even know how I recognized him as Jesus, but I was sure this was Jesus. And I was already on my knees. I turned toward him. I put my face on the ground, and I'm just weeping. It's like he's flooding me with love and kindness. There was no judgment. It was just pure forgiveness and kindness and love, something I'd never experienced. I was 18 years old, and I'd never experienced this before. I never had an experience like this afterward. That day was unique in my life. I don't even know how long I was there. Finally, after a while, I got up, I was wiping the tears from my eyes, and I couldn't stop thinking about Jesus. Constantly thinking about Jesus. At night, I was dreaming about Jesus. At night after night, I'm dreaming about Jesus, and I'm dreaming that I'm telling people about Jesus in my dream. This is a strange thing, a Jewish kid telling people about Jesus in his dream. And I didn't realize at the time that dream was prophetic, that's what I was going to spend my life doing. He was just giving me a picture of it. And then Then a few weeks later, the guy who had shared with me back in August, now it's November, a few months earlier, he saw me walking on the floor. He said, Jim, if you received Jesus in your heart, I said, I don't know, maybe. I think I have. I said, why? He says, you haven't stopped smiling for weeks. Something happened to you. I said, something has happened. I said, how can I stay close to God? I've never felt close like this before. He said, if you read your Bible every day, you'll stay close to God. If you don't, you won't. So for 47 years, I've read the Bible every day of my life. When I had the flu, when I had COVID, when I had in the hospital, had an operation, I read my Bible every day. You know, I start in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and I just start slowly reading on through. When I'm done, I start the next day, and I'm doing the same thing, and I get through the Bible, get to Revelation chapter 22, and I start again. So that's my story, and that's how I came to know the Lord.
I remember there was a very powerful part where your family found out that this is what took place, and they didn't take kindly to it. Your mom in particular, can you walk us through that as well, of your mom's response and reaction to this decision?
Yeah, so I shared it with my parents, and of course they had concern, and my mom came up to the university after some time, and she wanted to see, you know, what's this church I was going to, what's this group of people, because after that I moved into a house with 9 other Christian guys that was owned by a church that I was going to, and they had 2 houses by campus of guys and 1 house of girls in there, and I was living with 9 other Christian guys, and she wanted to see what was going on. And then I remember the first time I brought her to church with me, she was weeping in the church. And after church, I said, you were really touched. She said, what do you mean? Why do you think I was touched? I said, you were just weeping during the service. She said, I'm weeping because of you. I said, well, where would you like me to be on a Sunday morning? She says, how about the beach like any other normal human being? And so I said, why don't you read the New Testament? Just read the New Testament and see what it's like for. See what it's like. And she was reading the New Testament, and she got done with it. She read the whole New Testament. She was a very deep reader. I said, what'd you think? She said, I don't blame them for killing Jesus after the things that he said. Who is he to go up to these religious leaders that have spent their lives trying to teach people, and he says to them, you whitewash tombs? I mean, it's no wonder they killed him. And I said, why don't you read the Old Testament? And because most Jews have never read the Old Testament, just like most Christians have never even really read the Bible. And she read the entire Old Testament, and she got done, and she was like, wow, I mean, we Jews, we deserve everything that ever happened to us. I mean, God warned us over and over again. So she was really moved by that, but it wasn't until a number of years later she was doing more reading, and she was reading The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And she was reading, I don't know where she got it, she was reading a intervarsity devotional, and she was reading the Bible all at the same time. And she called me one day, she says, Jimmy, you wouldn't believe what happened. I said, what happened? She was 72 years old at the time. She said, I believe Jesus is the Son of God. I said, you do? She said, yeah. She said, I was reading about his crucifixion, and it hit me. It hit me. Jesus is the Son of God. And she called up a local pastor, and they were living in Hilton Head, South Carolina at the time. They had a beachfront home, and he took her out back into the ocean, and he baptized her. And she started growing, and that's how she started growing. And, you know, the next week she called me on the phone. We would speak every Sunday. She called me on the phone the next week. She said, Jimmy, you can find any damn thing in the Bible. I said, you can? What'd you find, Mom? She said it says that husbands should love the wife of their youth. I said, yeah, it does say that. Tell that to Dad. And she had it on speakerphone, and my dad was in the background. And he says, I know all that already. And you know, and she just started growing from there. But yeah, at first they didn't receive it. And my father, interestingly enough, I prayed for him for years. I read the Bible to him. I prayed with him, He wouldn't move, wouldn't budge. And then on his deathbed, not from me, from a Jamaican nurse, she shared with him on his deathbed, and he gave his life to the Lord 5 days before he died. I mean, it was just amazing what God did. At the age of 94, he received the Lord. So that's my
Incredible.
testimony.
Shout out to the Jamaicans.
I'm telling you, incredible. So that's a powerful testimony, Dr. Tour. And I have more so want to get your personal perspective on this because, as you stated, you know, it's plenty of Jewish people that don't read Scripture, just like it's plenty of Christian people that don't read Scripture. And you yourself, growing up secular, as a secular Jew, stated that, hey, a couple of times a year, my family went to the synagogue. So my question is, for your mother to have such a, you know, such an emotional reaction to you, you know, choosing to follow Jesus, but still at the same time only, you know, really practicing faith at her discretion, let's so to speak. Why do you think she has such a an emotional reaction to your change of heart?
Any Jew will know this. I mean, when a Jew turns to Jesus and accepts Jesus as the Messiah, I mean, if my home had not been secular, if it had been Orthodox, they would have had a funeral for me. Literally, they have a funeral. They do what's called sitting Shiva, which means that you're mourning for the dead. You take all the mirrors in your home and you turn them around. You act as if the person has died. It's an extreme
Wow.
thing. To be a Gentile is you know, you guys are okay to the Jews. I mean, you're just Gentiles. I mean, to receive Jesus, you have betrayed the Jewish nation. And this is not something that happened in the first century. This is something that was later rabbinical teachings, where they said that Jesus was a diviner, Jesus was following satanic things. I mean, they wrote terrible things about him because so many people were receiving him. And so they made it very hard. Just like it says in John chapter 12, it says, many even of the rulers were believing on him, but they would not confess him for fear of being thrown out of the synagogue. So they would be thrown out of the synagogue is different than being thrown out of a church. If you're thrown out of a church, you just go across the street to another church. You're thrown out of the synagogue in the first century. You have no relations with any other Jews. You're just like excommunicated. Nobody's allowed to talk with you. But the next verse in John chapter 12 is, because they loved the approval of men more than the approval of God. So if we think that God has patience with people just because they're worried about what their image is going to be, I mean, these people were going to be thrown out of the synagogue. And still the Bible says because they love the approval of men more than the approval of God. There is no patience for people denying the faith. And that's why Jesus said that he said that if you are ashamed of me and my words in this sinful and perverse generation, I will be ashamed of you when I come in the glory of my Father and his holy angels. I mean, this is serious stuff that is being taught to us. So we're not to be ashamed of him. But yeah, when you take on Jesus as a Jew, you can expect your family to react in a very severe way.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I really did not know that. So what is the crux of the Jewish? So I understand, because I read Matthew and I saw obviously the contention between Christ and the Jews at that time. But that same contention still exists today between Christ and the Jewish community?
Yes, it still exists today. You know, there were a number of reasons for that, and the Bible tells us. One of the reasons is the Jews thought they would lose their power, and so we're also told that he would be rejected. This was prophesied by Isaiah and by others, that the Messiah would come and he would be rejected by his own people. This is what it tells us in Isaiah 53. Isaiah 52, verse 13, through the end of Isaiah 53. So all of Isaiah 53 plus 52, verse 13, 14, and 15 talks about the Messiah, and it talks about the crucifixion that was going to occur 500 years before crucifixion was even invented. Isaiah prophesies this, because the word of God is not just predicting the future. The word of God defines the future. As a scientist, I chase the universe trying to explain it. The Bible doesn't do that. The Bible defines what the universe will be. God said, "Let there be light." Boom, there was light. This is how it works. The Bible defines what it's going to be. When Isaiah is speaking about the crucifixion and he's speaking about the suffering Messiah, he's not just only predicting what's going to happen to the Messiah. He is defining what's going to happen to the Messiah, because every word in the Bible is true and it defines the universe. When the Bible has said it, the universe has to conform to what the Bible has prescribed. That's what's going on here. And so you see that there would be a rejection. It was prophesied they were rejecting these things because Jesus was not conforming to rabbinic Judaism. What happened is when they came out of Babylon, they had realized that they had violated the 613 commandments that Moses had given them in the law. And so they put human commandments around each one of those 613 commandments. For example, the Sabbath day, there's over 1,000 Jewish rabbinical commandments around the Sabbath day. And so that's why Jesus said to them, you know, the teachings of men, your teachings of men have made the word of God of no effect. In other words, you've surrounded these people with so much they can't move. And this is why they were getting upset with Jesus, because his disciples were eating the heads of grain and they were eating without washing their hands or something. And there were all these rabbinical rules, and Jesus didn't go for these at all. In fact, he often went intentionally contrary to those rules. He obeyed the 613 commandments that were given by Moses, but not all these rules. So he didn't conform to rabbinic Judaism, and it caused them to hate him to the point where they wanted to have him killed. And that's what happened. And it was exactly as what was prophesied. And then exactly what is prophesied also is they will return. There's going to be a tribulation, and in the second 3.5 years of the tribulation, it's a 7-year tribulation, the Jews are going to get so beaten up, many are going to turn to him. There's going to be 144,000 of them that are going to evangelize the world, and you will see this. And it says in Romans 11 that the Gentiles, through their witness, they're going to make the Jews jealous for the Lord. And I was jealous for the Lord. I saw the way these Christians were loving God and reading their Bible and respecting it. It made me jealous for these sort of things. It's exactly like it says in Romans chapter 11. And then it says in Romans 11, when those Jews come to the Lord, many Gentiles are going to come to the Lord through them. And that's exactly what you see. When a Jew comes to the Lord, they end up bringing many Gentiles to the Lord. If I go 1 week without leading a Gentile to the Lord, I think it's a wasted week. I mean, just last week, I led 3 Gentiles to the Lord. Just yesterday, I led 3 more Gentiles to the Lord. And this is what I do. And this is exactly, and then those Gentiles that come to the Lord, they're to evangelize the Jews. This is exactly what it says in Romans chapter 11. Exactly as God says, exactly as the Word of God says, it happens. It has to happen. The universe conforms to the Word of God.
Man, let me tell you, Dr. James, your conviction is reverberating.
It
like
is.
I'm getting hype.
It is. You know, I'm so happy we have a scientist here too, because I get to ask some of the questions that I feel uncomfortable. The logical and practical questions that I almost feel shunned to ask someone else.
Because you can't. I mean, those questions you can't ask those at church.
Exactly. Here's a good example of a question I wouldn't feel comfortable asking that I can ask you.
Wait, hold tight. I know you ready to get into it.
I'm ready.
I know. Hold tight. Listen, we got to give a shout out to our episode sponsor.
Let's do it,
guys. Not only do you need to click the link in the title to go ahead and follow our renowned scientist that we got on the platform, James Tour, which is how we discover him. So please subscribe and take a look at his YouTube
Dr.
platform.
James, you better put some respect on that man's name.
Dr. James Tour. Please subscribe and check out his channel. That is urgent. We actually do that immediately. But we also want to give a very big shout out to our episode sponsor. Listen, Cook Unity really helps us put this show on. Guys, I know we've talked to y'all about a lot of meal prep companies, and we've tried them all. Trust me, they all allow us to test, but Cook Unity is by far the number one. And it's a new year, so I know Tyshawn's been on the meal prep. I've been on the meal prep, but let's be honest, even though it takes 4 to 5 hours on a Sunday, I need that 4 to 5 hours to continue my grind and or get some rest.
Right.
So Cook Unity's award-winning chefs whipping up this variety of meals,
It's
okay,
good.
delivered fresh to your door,
Yeah.
cannot be beat. So please go ahead and restructure your routine. Add Cook Unity in there, guys, and they're doing something very special for our initiates. All you got to do is go to cookunity.com/initiate or enter code initiate before checking out for 50% off your first week. That's huge savings, guys. And that's 50% off your first week by using code initiate or going to cookunity.com/initiate. Big shout out to Cook Unity.
So, Dr.
Sorry
James
to
Tour,
interrupt.
you know, when I hear that someone tells me they've had an encounter with Christ, some part about it used to upset me a bit, you know, because when I think about it, I hear a lot. I've heard that many times, by the way. I've heard many times people say they've had this encounter with Christ. And the reason it bothered me because that never happened to me. That's been the furthest situation I've had. In fact, I felt like I've had to work hard to study my way to Christ in my understanding, even today, like still cementing every cinder block and cornerstone of my faith now, mainly because he has not revealed himself to me. I feel like people that have said that they have an unfair advantage in their faith with Christ because he just popped up and said, look, here I am right here in front of you.
Right.
Why does he not just do that to everybody here? Wouldn't that be the ultimate way to evangelize if Christ just wanted to reveal himself to his people?
No, he gives us, each one of us, exactly what we need. You will often find with Jews that they have an experience similar to mine. Well, not often. It happens. It happens a lot of times. An experience similar to mine, because we need a little bit more. He does it. You will see with Muslims. He often gives them a dream that Jesus will appear to them in a dream, because Muslims put a lot of stock in dreams. They have whole books on what certain things mean in dreams, and so because they put a lot of stock in dreams, Jesus reveals himself to them in dreams. The Bible actually puts a lot of stock in dreams. It's just that in our Western society, we've gotten away from that. So he uses that less often, generally in a Western society. He works with each person. Now, if you think that Jesus appearing on earth is going to make the world conform to him, first of all, he appeared once on earth before. And there were 12 men that were following him at the end, and they all fled from him. One betrayed him, and the others fled from him. And if it weren't for a few faithful women, there wouldn't have been anybody initially at the cross. And then finally, John had the courage to come back to the foot of the cross, but all the others, Judas was already hung himself, but the 10 others were hiding far away up on a hill and watching this thing. So that didn't work. And then if you look at his second coming in the millennial kingdom, this is spoken about in the prophet Isaiah, in the Isaiah scrolls. What will happen is Jesus is going to set up his millennial kingdom here on earth for 1,000 years, and still people are going to rebel. There's going to be some faithful, and then there's going to still be rebellious, because he's going to show sin as utterly sinful, because people say exactly what you say. If Jesus would just show up, then all these people would obey. No, this is going to happen. The Bible already talks about this, and there's going to be such rebellion, even with Jesus reigning here physically on earth from Jerusalem, that after the 1,000-year reign, he's going to say that's enough, and he's going to let the Satan out of the abyss. Satan will have spent 1,000 years in there, and he's going to let him out, because he says he's going to say enough. So first of all, he gives us exactly what we need, and probably he felt that you need to study your way more into this, because if you had an experience like that, you probably wouldn't get very deep. And so he does exactly what he needs to do for each person individually, and thank God for it.
Wow. Great question. Great answer.
No,
that was good all around.
honestly, referring back to what happened when he was here makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
That
he already tried that.
Way. That's funny. That's funny. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because you know, I'm just, I guess, personal update here. You just let me know. Is the relationship with your family? Did it get pretty? Is it in a more healthy state now with most of your secular Jewish family at this point?
Yes, yes, yes. My family was, my direct family was so secular. My parents never cut off relationship with me. It hurt them. And I would say that my extended family, once in a while they would make comments. Most of the talking was not to my face, it was behind my back. But what happened is I married an amazing woman. My wife is just amazing. She's a Gentile. She comes from a family that loves the Lord. Her mom and dad love the Lord. And she is as sweet as can be. And she won the hearts of my family. My family came to love her so much. And then, my mother said, Jim, you're going to have a lot of trouble with your children because, you're forcing them into all this Christian stuff and everything. And my children are all grown now. Their ages 40 to 29. I've got 4 children. And she saw my kids grow, and she saw how well adjusted they were. None of them ever gave us any trouble. And that really spoke to them that, wow, this thing really worked out. And these are good kids. And they all went on, and they got extended in education and all these things. And they're just really nice kids. And that spoke to them a lot. To see this sort of thing, and I never really got cut off as if it had been sort of an Orthodox family, and so I was good with my family. I was fine with them, and they were very good to me. It had hurt them, but it was really nothing compared to what persecution can be. I went through like kindergarten level persecution. Even it says in the book of Hebrews, you haven't yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. So the criteria for really undergoing persecution is the shedding of blood. Never happened to me. One day I was out preaching open air preaching. One guy said he was going to punch me in the nose. He never did, and I was kind of wanting him to because I wanted to shed a little blood to at least meet that threshold of what persecution is.
he's funny.
Thanks.
Listen, I want to talk to you about this because I know if you just now tuning in, we got a world-renowned scientist, a leading scientist with us, Dr. James Tour. And Dr. James, he's a chemist, he's a nanotechnologist, scientist, all of that good stuff. So we got to get into the nuts and bolts of these things. But me personally, Dr. James, as I think about science, I do just my initial thoughts of it, I think is the opposite of faith. Once you start talking too much about the facts of life, it's kind of like, well, I'm not sure, because the more I think about it, and I think even when you think about the more science develops, you kind of think that it's an enemy of faith, and it kind of reminds me of like when I was a kid, I remember dropping food on the ground and picking it up to eat it. And mom was like, yeah, why would you pick that off the ground and eat it? I'm like, well, I prayed for it. And she's just like slapped me in the back of the neck, like, boy, don't you eat stuff off the ground? But I'm like, but I thought, you pray over your food is good. So, and I say that, because I want to get your perspective on this. Is science the enemy or the antithesis of faith, or can it work together in tandem?
Science is full of things of faith. There's so many things that we grab as scientists, which is faith. You take the Big Bang Theory, the whole theory of the origin of the universe. Up until the 1950s, there was a theory that the universe has always been. And that was contrary to the Bible, because the Bible tells us that there was an origin to the universe. God created this. And that's what most scientists believed in the 1950s. So this is in my lifetime. So it's not ancient history. And then it wasn't until 1964, with the discovery of microwave background radiation, that they realized that the universe is expanding, so it goes back to an origin point, and that's the Big Bang Theory that the term had been coined, which actually matched up with the Bible. And so now you've got this theory that from nothing burst forth everything. Now, we say as believers that God was the origin and God took nothing and made all these things. So there's this wonderful and loving God that did this. But scientists believe. They don't have substantiation for this. It's not based on fact. They believe that all of this poofed from nothing, purely materialistic. I mean, this is a huge miracle. This is bigger than any miracle given in the Bible. And scientists are like, give me that one miracle, and I'll explain everything else without miracles. I mean, and now you just take life, just life itself. No scientist has ever created life. For not only do we not know how life originated on an early Earth, scientifically, nobody has ever made life in a laboratory with all our modern methods. And so, where did life come from? And they have this idiotic theory that from a primordial soup of lightning strikes on a bunch of water, molecules formed, and those come together and form groups of molecules, and that then formed a cell, that formed life, and then multicellular organisms, and then all the life we see around us. I mean, we don't have substantiation for this, like none. And so they're taking that purely on faith. So science is full of faith all the time. But I'll tell you, our Christian faith is not just a blind faith. It is faith based on fact. Jesus has risen from the dead. There's so many facts around the resurrection. The Christian faith is based upon the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. This is what the scriptures themselves tell us. Jesus rising from the dead substantiated that indeed he was the Son of God, and he overcame sin because he overcame death. And if you look at the resurrection, we have both biblical evidence and we have extra biblical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And if I'm going to give you biblical evidence, we first have to establish, is the Bible reliable? Is the Bible reliable, full of facts for us? And the answer is yes. Let me go through that with you, if I could. If you go into any academic institution, like this university, like any academic institution, and you speak to these unbelieving religion professors, most professors in the departments of religion are not believers, and many of them are even agnostic or even atheist in secular universities, and they come from all sorts of backgrounds.
Did not know that.
They may have come from a Christian background, a Jewish background, a Muslim background, a Hindu background, but most of them are not believers in God. But if you ask them, here's what they will agree upon. There was a man named Jesus who died by crucifixion, and this may have been one of the strongest facts in human history from that era, because there's so much written about it. So they will say, yes, there was a man named Jesus who died by crucifixion. They would agree to this, that Jesus' disciples asserted that he had risen from the dead and appeared to them, and those disciples died for that assertion. So, even though they don't believe that Jesus has risen from the dead, they will say that his disciples believed it, asserted that, and they died for that assertion. The third thing that they will say is that some of Jesus's people, some people that didn't even regard Jesus as being a prophet, like his brother James, and even enemies of Jesus, like Paul, say that Jesus appeared to them and they died for that assertion. So that they'd agree to. Then if you go to one of the greatest historians, probably the greatest historian of the 20th century was Will Durant. And he wasn't a Christian. He said he was an agnostic and with pantheistic overtones. But he, as a trained historian, said things about the Gospels. Now, I am a trained chemist. You can put two chemicals, you can write the formula or the name of two chemicals on a piece of paper and ask me, if I reacted those two chemicals together, would they form another product? I could look at those and say, yes, there'd be a reaction. Here's what the reaction would be. The reaction would go slowly, or the reaction would go explosively fast. How can I do that? The man on the street, the woman on the street, they can't do that. I can do that because I've been trained in this. And Will Durant was a trained historian, the greatest historian of the 20th century. What does he write about the Gospels? He says the Gospels agree remarkably well. He says, you say there's contradictions. They're not contradictions. Your contradictions are minutia. What he means by this is, if you have a car accident and you have 3 different people see that car accident, you could ask those people about it. If every detail between those 3 people is exactly the same, that means there's been collusion. They agreed with each other. When you ask 3 people about the car accident, you'll get the general story, but each little detail is different. This is exactly how it should be. So you look at those little differences between the Gospels. He says that's exactly how it should be if it's honestly written. He is discerning this. Then he says that if you read the way they wrote, the way that these Gospels are written, again and again they wrote the weaknesses of the apostles, where they doubted Jesus over and over again. They were fighting for higher places in the kingdom, arguing about this among them. They even report this despairing cry of Jesus from the cross when he says, "Father, why hast thou forsaken me?" He says they never would have recorded this if they were making this stuff up. Whenever you write about yourself, you always write yourself in a good light. So, for example, if you 2 guys there, if you had an argument with one another, and whoever your producer is or your boss says, "Okay, I want each of you to come to my office and explain to me independently what happened." I mean, what'll happen is, Ryan, you go there and you say, "Tyshawn, he did this and this and this," and I was really quite nice. And Tyshawn would come in there and say, Ryan did this and this, and you always build yourself into a better light. This is normal. He says these guys didn't do it. They reported again and again all their weaknesses. So to a trained historian, he looks at the New Testament. He says they agree remarkably well. He even went so far as to say that if you tell me that a small group of men, that 11 men could have written this, could have composed this in one generation to come with such an appealing ethic as this man, if you tell me that they could have done this, could have written this document, that would be more miraculous than anything Jesus ever performed in the Gospels itself. This is what we have. So when they say it, so what does the New Testament tell us? So this is the substantiation we have behind the New Testament. What does the New Testament say? Jesus rose from the dead on the 3rd day. He was crucified on a Friday, he was in the grave on a Friday, a Saturday, boom, Sunday morning. The sun was up, it was light out. He appeared not on a foggy night, he appeared to a group of women, and he appeared first to Mary, then to another group of women. That's what the Bible tells us. Why would it say women? Women had no legal standing either in Israel or in Rome. They couldn't even go into a court and testify. Just like we don't allow a 7-year-old testify in court because 7-year-olds make stuff up. I mean, kids just make stuff up. They don't testify in court. And women weren't allowed to testify in court because they thought women make stuff up. Why does the Bible report that Jesus appeared to women first? Because that's the way it happened. That's the way it happened. And so they reported it that way. And then what happens is he says, "Go and tell my disciples." They go and tell the disciples. The disciples, it says, they didn't believe it. They didn't believe this happened. But Peter and John ran to the tomb to see what these crazy ladies were saying. They see the Roman guard is gone. They see the stone rolled away. The women couldn't have moved that stone themselves. And the Roman seal is broken. Pilate's seal is broken. They go into the tomb. And they see the grave clothes still there. If somebody stole the body, they take it with the grave clothes. They put a sheet around it, and then they wrap these, they put strips around it from bottom to top. They cover the whole thing. Nobody would take the time to take that off. But it wasn't, it even says in one of the Gospels, it was rolled up by itself. Rolled up suggests that it was even rolled up there, as if the body just came right through it. Who's going to take those grave clothes and neatly roll them up as if they had still been there on the body or something? It was so amazing to John that just seeing that empty tomb, the testimony of the women, and that empty tomb, the way the grave clothes were, it says he left the tomb believing. It says of Peter, he left just bewildered. He was like, something is going on here. And then Jesus appears to them. He appears to them in the upper room and says they thought they were seeing a ghost. They thought they were seeing a spirit. He says, no, guys, come here. He commands them to touch him. He says, see, I have flesh and bones. Touch me. Touch me. I've risen from the dead. This was remarkable. And then Jesus said to them, I mean, it's amazing what Jesus said. He said, have you something here to eat? And it says they gave him a piece of broiled fish. The Bible is very specific. It doesn't say they gave him food. It says a piece of broiled fish, even how they had cooked it. They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he ate it. He demonstrated to them he was physical, risen from the dead. Then he disappears. And then later on, Thomas, who had not been with them at the time, they said, we've seen the risen Savior. We've seen him. And Thomas was like, I don't believe that. You guys are crazy. I don't believe it. You must have seen an imposter, some guy with a beard and long hair or something. And Thomas said, I won't believe it unless I stick my finger into the hole in his hands, holes in his hands, and unless I stick my hand into the hole in his side. So what does Jesus do? Jesus comes again. He says, Thomas, come here. Thomas, come here. Because when Jesus was on the cross, they put nails in his hands and his feet. And it says that the Roman soldier had thrust his spear into his side long after Jesus was dead, just to ensure that he was dead. So this nonsense that Jesus didn't die on the cross. No one's ever come off a cross alive, because if he did, the men who hung him there have to go up in his place. And these men were trained in crucifixion. If you ask anybody in the army, what's your job? They'll tell you your job. I'm a cook, I'm a mechanic, I fly helicopters, whatever. These guys, their job was to crucify people. He put that spear into Jesus' side. It's his blood and water gushed out. Jesus is up high here on the cross. He's down here. His spear is 6 feet long. He stabs upward. He must have hit the main artery in the middle or the heart, because it's his blood and water gushed out. Why blood and water? The blood had already coagulated. If you're dead for many hours, the blood coagulates. You get an emulsion. You get this heavy phase of thick blood, and then you get water just slightly pink, and it comes out as this emulsion. The Bible writer writes for us, it was blood and water. That means the blood had already phase separated. There was no way Jesus could have been living at that point. That's what he reports. It was into that wound. Jesus appears to them. He says, Thomas, come here. Stick your finger into the holes in my hands, he commands him. He says, now stick your hand into the hole in my side, and be not unbelieving, but believing. Thomas even inserts his hand in there, falls. You can't go against the command of the risen Savior right in front of you. He commands him to stick his hand in there. He must have stuck his hand in there. He falls on his knees. He says, my Lord and my God. No imposter is walking around with a hole in his side big enough for a man to stick his hand and inviting people to do it. Jesus wasn't buckled over in pain. He was risen from the dead. He appeared to them indoors and out of doors, in Jerusalem, in Emmaus, on the road between Jerusalem and Emmaus. He walked with them a 3-hour journey. He walked with them to the Mount of Olives. He was on the Mount of Olives with them. He had ascended from the Mount of Olives. They saw that. He met them also before that. He met them by the Sea of Galilee. He stood on the beach. He told them where to throw their nets to catch a fish. And then when they came in, he was already cooking fish for them and bread on a fire there on the beach for breakfast. He says, bring your fish. Let's put it on here too. That's what Jesus did. That's what the Bible reports. The Bible reports how James was killed by the sword, the first apostle killed by the sword. The other apostles we have from extra biblical documents that talk about this. Peter was crucified upside down. Another was flayed alive, which means they pin you down to the ground and they skin you alive. Another was boiled in oil. We have the writings of Tacitus. Tacitus was looking now at extra biblical evidence from the first and beginning of the 2nd century. Tacitus was a Roman senator. Tacitus was also a historian. He is the historian that tells us that Nero was the one who set Rome on fire. It's that historian. He tells us how the Christians were dying, how they were killing them. He didn't care about the Christians. He said we would tie fresh animal skins to them and throw them to wild dogs. Because wild dogs are always hesitant to attack people. You tie a pig skin to them, they think you're a pig, and you just get shredded. He says this is how we were killed. They weren't recanting their confessions, saying Jesus is alive. Pliny, Pliny, Pliny the Younger. He's up in Asia Minor. He is this is current day Turkey. He is a Roman governor. We have his letter where he wrote to Trajan, the emperor of Rome at the time. He says, I'm killing all these Christians. I'm putting them to death because they're worshiping Jesus. They say this man is alive. This man that was crucified under Pontius Pilate, they're saying he's alive. And Trajan writes a letter back. We have his letter too. He says, keep putting them to death. If they won't recant this confession, put them to death. So these men, these women, these people in that generation of Jesus, they weren't dying for what they believed to be true. I would die for what I believe to be true, but that's nothing magical. People do that all the time. These people who saw Jesus risen from the dead, they were dying for what they knew to be true, and nobody dies for what they know to be a lie. These people, if you look at Watergate, this scandal that occurred, this cover-up, these strong, strong politicians, as soon as the FBI started poking around and said, we're going to put you in jail, boom, they all started revealing the real story. Chuck Colson goes to jail. The thing fell apart in a week. These men went to their death. Look, they'd be boiling the oil. This guy would be in it. If he was lying, he just said, look, psych, April Fools, let me tell you what we did with the body. These people went to their death seeing Jesus risen from the dead. This is what empowered them. So our faith, it's not a blind faith that we have. It is based on facts that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. It is based on the facts of prophecies, Old Testament prophecies. And you say, well, those prophecies were written into the Bible after Jesus. Couldn't have been. Couldn't have been. The Old Testament, we have almost the entire Old Testament dating back to 150 to 300 BC, and those documents were found in the 1940s and 1950s, and they date back to that time. So these prophecies, we have these exact prophecies, exactly what's prophesied came true. So our faith is not a blind faith, it is all based on fact. That's a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
No, that was excellent. And I mean, you just really.
I am delivered.
He is. He
You got to
really
hit
is.
one of those after he
I
goes
agree.
off like that.
Yeah, I mean, you brought a lot of things to my attention. I mean, from information on the resurrection, which is just proves how important it is to go back and make sure you study in Scripture, but also that a lot of the people who teach religion are non-believers. And the biggest thing,
Yeah.
the biggest thing to me was also at the beginning when you stated that scientists are basically saying miracles are not real, but the whole inception of how they say the world came to be is one huge miracle, right?
Huge miracle. Huge miracle. It's a joke. One guy even said, give us one miracle and we'll explain everything else. No, they want that miracle, and they explain miracle after miracle. I mean, there's so many things they can't explain, and they just make it up. They just make it up.
I'm very curious because I would imagine, I mean, scientists all over the world go crazy with you speaking about faith and, proving that, the historical and the evidence behind faith. So, in your community, are you, is it frowned upon, you being so convicted with faith or just taking faith into account, as you're doing research and as you're publishing, your articles and works? Like, how do they view a scientist that has faith?
God is so good. Jesus is so good to me. I mean, look at what he does. So they might mock, they might make fun of, but first of all, they never do it to my face. And if they do it behind my back, it's hard for them now. You know what Jesus has done? I mean, we've published so many papers. We've published more papers than 10 scientists will normally do in their lifetime. I've started a dozen different companies based on technology that's come out of my laboratory. We've discovered so many new things. And we have ways of metrics, of determining what is the impact that you've had on the scientific community. There's something called a Hirsch index, an H index, and measure. So the vast majority of people that would like to somehow make fun of me, my H index is much higher than theirs. So it's a little bit hard for them to make fun of me in that sense. But because God has been so good to me, He's elevated me in so many different ways. And you see how good Jesus is. So yeah, do they say things all the time? Do they say things to my face? Not normally. But there's a lot of people on the internet, because they sit behind their computer in anonymity, and they say all sorts of things about me. But Jesus said, "Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." He said, "Woe to you if all men speak well of you, for so they spoke of the false prophets." And so I'm in very good company, and I just reflect back on the things that they've said about Jesus. Yeah, but they say things about me, and but generally my career has just blown them away. And this is all the grace of God. I don't take any credit for this. This is the grace of God. Jesus blesses me. He pours it into my lap, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. This is what my Jesus has done for me.
Incredible.
I want to
Incredible.
ask this because the Bible. By the way, Dr. James Tour in the building, world-renowned scientist and man of faith. Strange mix, but it has happened at the highest levels.
Exactly.
He's here in the building with us.
Make sure you click the link in the description and check out his YouTube platform. It's growing exponentially, and we're just big fans of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Incredible scholar here with us. So we're about to throw some of the hardest questions we can come up here while we have his time. And we'll have some Q&A later on. So you guys stay patient at the end of the show.
All right, we got some non-believers. They want to ask some questions. We're going to get y'all straightened out today.
Hey,
we got a scientist.
And I want to get this right because I hear a lot of Christians call the Bible an allegorical book. And you obviously say the Bible is based on facts. Being that the Bible is based on facts, is it incorrect to call the Bible an allegorical book? And are there allegories in the Bible, or did every story happen exactly as it was stated, fact for fact?
Oh, of course there are allegories. I mean, Jesus said, "I am the door." I mean, you're not a door, Jesus. I mean, he's speaking allegorically.
Right.
And in fact, there is an occasion where he reproved the disciples for taking something literally that he meant allegorically. He said, beware, they're in the boat. He says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. And the guys start looking at each other. Hey, who forgot the bread? You forgot to bring the bread. I mean, this is what he's talking. And he says, guys, I'm not talking about bread. I'm talking about the leaven of the Pharisees, the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. So there's an occasion where they took something literally, and he reproved them. He said, I'm just speaking allegorically. So yes, there is allegory in the Bible. Jesus speaks allegorically sometimes. But there are other occasions where you cannot take it allegorically because it's spoken of over and over again as fact over and over again, and he stresses these sorts of things. And the Bible is not an easy document. It's not an easy document, and this is why we study it, and this is why you can spend a lifetime with the Bible, and you're constantly learning from it. And what happens is we read the Bible and say, wow, this really speaks to me. And that is great. The Bible speaks to us. But then when we want to understand context and other things, sometimes it's good to say, okay, what have other people, how have they viewed this? Was this viewed allegorically? And you look at what scholars have done. There's so much scholarship in the Bible. We've got for 1,500 years, we've got Jewish scholarship around the Old Testament. And 1500 BC. So for 3,500 years, we have Jewish scholarship. For 2,000 years, we have Christian scholarship. That's a lot of years of scholarship. And usually you think, a PhD is 4 years. We're talking about, collectively, we have over 5,000 years of scholarship. So we can go back to those written documents and see, okay, how did they view it in this generation? When they weren't influenced by TikTok, they weren't influenced by these sort of things. How did they view this? So it gives us a greater understanding. And it's so good that we have scholars that have provided a basis for us to have these apologetics, these arguments that substantiate these things. It's so good that we have archaeologists that look up and find these artifacts that substantiate every city that the Bible has referenced, substantiate the wars that went on in these locales. And then we have the coins that people have found that mark exactly the types of things that were going on. I have in my office, I have a coin that my Jewish friends have given me that from Israel, and it just all marked and labeled and substantiated, that has the P on it for Pilate, from the very generation of Jesus, and they would only put the letter P because it was the Greek like letter P, and because if the coin had a face on it, the Jews wouldn't touch it because they considered it like idol worship. It just had the letter P. We have these coins that substantiate the things that we reference in the Bible. It's so good that we have these experts in coins. It's so good that we then, on the other side of it, that we have people that can pull us out of that and say, look, it's what the Bible is speaking to us. How does it impact my life today? That's what I need to know, so that we have pastors that can help us to say, wow, that verse really encourages me. That spoke to me today in exactly what I'm going through. And so God, in his infinite wisdom and by his grace, has people with all these different abilities and backgrounds. Some people that can sing, that start singing scripture verses and just start drawing you to God through this. People that have that talent and can pull this together. So it's the whole body of Christ that makes this document, this book, what it is.
Dr. James, I'm very curious because, as you mentioned, you got some of the leading research and technology being, brought to the world, from your office or your camp, your campaign. I'm just very curious if you think that some aspects of scientific research, as we advance, could potentially take us away from God.
Research and science has never taken me away from God. There are certainly things in my field that I read that don't pair up with what the Bible says, but I have never seen a scientific fact oppose anything of what's written in the Bible. I've just never seen it. There are many theories that are not facts that are pushed by scientists as facts. So for example, like we use this example of if you were in the 1940s, 1950s, you would have been told that the universe has always been. And it wasn't until the 1960s that we know it had an origin, exactly like what the Bible says. In 1972, Gould comes out and says this whole gradualism that Darwin talked about, that these gradual changes over long periods of time, Gould comes out, and he's a secular scientist, and he says, no, that's not what the fossil record shows. What the fossil record shows is that you have very fast changes over short periods of time. That was in 1972. It was called punctuated equilibrium. So you had a theory that was pushed as fact that turned out not to be fact, didn't match up with what the Bible says, and then there's this new fact. We were told that the dinosaurs died because of climate change. And then it wasn't until 1980, Alvarez came with his hypothesis that a meteorite hit the Yucatan Peninsula, threw all this dirt up into the air. That obscured the sun. The plants died. The herbivores therefore died. The carnivores had no herbivores to eat. They died. And that's what killed off the dinosaurs. And so you have things that were put forth as facts that turned out not to be facts at all. They were just theories. Now, if you look at facts, show me a fact that contradicts with what the Bible says. I haven't seen it. So when you really look at things and you understand this is science, but it's just a theory, then you don't have to hang your hat on that thing. This is the working theory, okay? But it's subject to change because these theories are changing. Certainly on the order of decades, these theories are changing. So it's never shaken my faith. Science has never shaken my faith. In fact, it's strengthened my faith. It's made me appreciate God all the more.
Okay, well, what about, let me ask you this, because let's get away from the facts that were later proven to actually be theories, and more so about some of the scientific discoveries, like with the AI technology. I know they're doing working on like gene cloning and those types of things. Do you think that those things, if continued to be pursued, could potentially be harmful for humanity and how we view faith as a whole?
Every new technology has the potential to be deleterious, to be bad, and to be good. I'll take you a car, for example. Ambulance can take you to a hospital. That is a good thing. Somebody could get in an ambulance and drive through a crowd at a parade and kill a lot of people. That is the same technology being applied in different ways. AI can be terrific. I mean, if you learn how to do things and control at the genome level, which they're doing, you could cure all sorts of diseases. You could cure sickle cell anemia. You could cure all sorts of genetic diseases. You could make it so that people who are genetically predisposed to get breast cancer are no longer getting breast cancer. You can do this when you can start modifying at the genome level. These can have great effects. I mean, think about your child. I mean, you look at how much you love your child, and your child has some genetic disorder. If you could modify a few genes and correct that, that would be great. If uh, um, your kid is on the difficult end of the spectrum, I mean, it's difficult to raise children like that. So if you could just modify a gene and make them all better, that would be tremendous. On the other side, you could use it as a tool to build a super race that would start coming against all other races. You could use it as a tool to eliminate a certain race, where you find out what are traces within a certain race, and you come in and you do genetic modifications that you release a virus that would do genetic modifications that will wipe out a race. Yes, there are possibilities of all of this. So you see, it's the same technology applied in two different ways, but every technology can do that. I'm looking into a camera right now. I just got a new camera. You can use these cameras to do podcasts and talk about Jesus. You can use the same camera to film pornography and corrupt the minds of people. So same technology applied in different ways, always has been and always will be, because people are dastardly. We will always find ways to sin with everything we have, because sin is utterly sinful.
Honestly, that's a fact.
Yeah, sure.
That is an absolute fact. You gave such a incredible response. Even after you gave it, I was just letting it settle and breathe. When you broke down the allegories, in the Bible and the parables, I think to some degree it's still a slippery slope on how we interpret what is and what is not an allegory, because I've heard, some people teach and interpret that some entire stories were not necessarily historically true and were allegories. For example, I've heard that even the story of Jonah and the whale, that is an entire allegorical story, as he was not technically living in the whale, but it more so represented being, swallowed up by circumstance. Mm-hmm. I also hear even people go as far, to describe heaven and hell, not necessarily as a physical location, but allegorical, around this, destination of peace, or this destination of strife that we can feel or experience, while here and even potentially in the afterlife. So to get to a more specific question around that, based on science and all your studies up until this point in your life, have you confirmed that heaven or hell in particular is an actual destination, a physical destination that you would actually visit, or more of a concept that we experience here and in the afterlife?
Yeah. These are all good questions, and these are all questions that people have, and they're legitimate questions, and they're good answers for these sort of things. Now, I'm not a Bible scholar, I'm a chemist, but I can tell you that this story of Jonah and the whale, Jesus made reference to it. He said, as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days, so the Son of Man will be in the earth for 3 days. And he was speaking of his being after his crucifixion, how he was going to be in the earth for 3 days. He did not say, just as Jonah in that story happened. He says, just as Jonah was in the whale for 3 days. So if you want to discard the Jonah story, you have to discard what Jesus was saying too. But, and then as far as heaven and hell, there's a lot of description in the prophet Isaiah describes what hell is going to be like. A lot of those descriptions are substantiated by Jesus. He talked about where the worm does not die, where the fire is not quenched, and the worm does not die. He spoke of this. He said that there is going to be a great chasm between these places in Sheol, and he spoke about these things. And so Jesus referenced these things over and over again. And so you'd have to throw a lot at the doorstep of allegory to get rid of these. But let me bring some calm to this. The Bible is very specific about what needs to be done to be saved. And it says in Romans chapter 10, verse 9, that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that he's risen from the dead, you shall be saved. This is very specific. You confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that he's risen from the dead, and you shall be saved. It does not say you got to believe in your heart the virgin birth. You got to believe in your heart the crossing of the Red Sea, that the Red Sea parted and they went through the Red Sea. It doesn't say that you have to believe the Adam and Eve story in order to be saved. It's the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the confession of his lordship in order to be saved. And that's it. What I have seen, and after leading hundreds of people to the Lord, what I have seen is that once you deal with that issue, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead and his lordship, then people start reading the Bible very differently. And as you walk with God and you see the Bible is proved over and over and over again, a lot of these issues go away because you start to embrace the Word of God differently. And it's something that you can really bank on. Jesus said in John chapter 8, he said that he who sent me is trustworthy. He who sent me is trustworthy. I trust him. I trust him. And this is something you grow in. You learn to trust them. I trust my wife. I've been married 43 years. I trust her that she will always have my best interest in mind. I trust her because for 43 years, she has always fulfilled her promises. She has always been good to me. And so I trust her. You learn to trust the Lord. You learn to trust the scriptures because you see it proved in your life over and over again. Early on, a lot of these things, I remember even early on, guys were talking about demons, and I said, you believe in demons? And, I was a brand new believer. They said, you don't? It's just all over the Bible. And then I thought, yeah, Jesus was talking about demons all the time. When you first come to the Lord, these things are so strange to you, but you learn to trust this book over and over again. So that's, and now let me deal with the other issue of believing in your heart that Jesus is risen from the dead. You say, do you have 100% absolute assurance of this? Let me tell you something. I don't think we can have 100% assurance of anything in this life, anything. And by this, I mean this. I am speaking to you guys right now. I'm speaking to the two of you right now. And I don't know for sure that you exist. I don't. This may all be a computer simulation. That the probability might be small, but it could happen. This is a computer simulation. You guys are just avatars sitting there and a few electrons and transistors, and I'm the same. And this is all being done by some space alien, and everything we see, it's all their space, all their computer. Again, small probability, but it's there. In other words, we can't have 100% assurance. I just shared with a guy just last week. I shared with a guy, and he said, well, I need 100% assurance before I would receive Jesus. I said, okay, do you have 100% assurance that George Washington lived? He says, yes. I said, you do? All the eyewitnesses to George Washington are dead. So how do you know? And in fact, even if they were alive, they might be lying. They might be lying to you. How do you know George Washington? Do you have 100% assurance? He said, you're right. I don't have 100%. Yeah, I said, you don't. We don't have 100% assurance. But what we do is we act upon the faith that we have. And let me tell you one short story from Mark chapter 9 that'll run this thing home. A man brings his son to Jesus' disciples, and he asks them to heal his son. And they're unable to heal him. And then they see Jesus coming off the mountain, and he grabs his son, he runs to Jesus, and says, Lord, heal my son if you can. And his son falls into convulsions right there in front of Jesus. And he says, Lord, heal my son if you can. And Jesus said, if you can? All things are possible to him who believes. And the man said something really profound here. He said, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. And you can understand how he had some unbelief because he had just brought the kid to Jesus' disciples. They were unable to heal him. And Jesus didn't say, well, you go away. When you come back, when you have 100% belief, you come to me. and I'll heal your son. No, Jesus immediately healed his son. Because the man was honest with him. He said, I'm not 100% there, but heal him anyway, Lord. Help my unbelief. And Jesus said, whatever belief you have, it's good enough. I don't know if the man's belief was 50% or 25%, but whatever it was enough. And Jesus healed his son. And I'll tell you, that man left Jesus believing much more clearly that Jesus was a healer after he saw Jesus heal his son. He believed him much more. And that's what happens. We believe much more over time. So I ask your audience today, I say, believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, proclaim his lordship, and that he has risen from the dead. I gave you biblical evidence. I gave you extra biblical evidence. You'll never have 100% of everything. But based on what I have said, take that evidence and embrace the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, because that's what you need to have to get saved, and that faith will then grow. That belief will then grow. That you are grabbing on and taking hold of the evidence that's there, it's going to grow with time.
I am delivered.
That was powerful. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, incredible. I think listen, I did not expect a renowned scientist to come save some people tonight. Because there's people in the chat that truly got delivered tonight.
Absolutely.
But I want to do this, man. I mean, I think, we've had an excellent conversation tonight. Dr. James Tour, thank you so much. I would like to go ahead and open up the phone lines so we can bring a couple people up. Excellent.
It's almost time to do it.
So this is what I'll do, and give a shout out to the our second episode sponsor real quick while I do
We
that.
absolutely have to do so. Shout out to the Fight the Flesh bracelets. Okay, you already know we are out here battling in this spiritual warfare. So we have the Fight the Flesh bracelet to be a reminder, another addition to your armor of the fight that we in. So please, guys, in the description, you can go ahead and click the link and get one of these very stylish, gold-plated bracelets.
Yep.
And even if you type in live, you get 10% off of your bracelet.
That's easy. They adjustable. They're beautiful, beautifully engraved. We literally had, I'm going to look this up on our store, but we had somebody put in an order for 24 bracelets.
Shout out to that person.
I know.
man.
I'm looking at their name in just a second, but I don't know what they purchased them for. But let me tell you, I know they
fighting.
I'm telling you, they got a whole gang, a whole army. But again, also guys, click in the title of the YouTube video to check out Dr. James Tour's work. And really quickly, Dr. James, while we're bringing people up, so be patient. We're gonna bring a couple people up, take a couple of questions. What I want to do actually is, and I know we briefly spoke about this, the Big Bang Theory or kind of these things that a lot of the scientists are pushing. But if you could,
by the way, guys, if you want to get on, the link is in the chat right now. Ryan just dropped it, so you can click, go backstage, turn your cameras on, and we'll go ahead and get to it right after this question.
And this is huge, by the way, because not many people get to ask him a question. So this is really like a once in a lifetime situation.
Yes.
He literally speaks across the world at the top university. So this is a real big deal, guys. So go ahead, join so we can bring you up.
Can I just say something? You guys have said so many nice things about me tonight. I sure hope my wife is watching.
Send her the link to the show.
Dr. James, man, you listen, you the man, man. You the man. So, but I want you to just, go over this very, very briefly because, and the viewers, the initiates, they'll see this once they go to your channel because you have been very critical of the Origin of Life research. And if you could take a brief moment to explain what the Origin of Life research is, why it has been so important to the scientific community, and how it might be detrimental to how we view faith.
Well, like I said, scientists have never made life in a lab. They've come up with all sorts of proposals, but what students learn from elementary school all the way up through advanced college, I'm talking graduate school, is the same model, that there was some primordial soup, some pond, and there were some molecules in this pond, some lightning strikes, molecules formed higher structures, these came together, formed a cell. We have no basis to substantiate that. We have no idea how to make life. And we taught all these people such that when I've taken surveys, 2/3 of the general public thinks that scientists have made simple life in the laboratory. 2/3 of the general public thinks that. And so the general public has been steered totally wrong. We don't know how to make life something as basic and fundamental as life. In fact, we can't even define what life is. We can show characteristics of life, but to define what it is even hard. And even just take a dead cell, can you bring it back to life, or even define what it is that was just lost at the moment that it died? It's a very hard concept. And what happens is scientists will put themselves forward and as if they've got a command of this thing, and people think that, oh, life is ubiquitous, so it just happens. It doesn't just happen. There's been input here, and it's an amazing, amazing thing. And so this is a stand that I've taken. We don't know how to make the 4 basic classes of compounds, and we don't know how to assemble them together. We don't know how to make the higher order structures. We don't know how to do this. And how this happened on an early Earth with nobody around, just by materialistic terms, we have no idea.
Wow.
That's the basic synopsis. You told me to give kindergarten level. And so I tried to not use the names of compounds or anything. And if people want more when they ask questions, I can certainly go as deep as they'd like.
That sounded 10th grade to me.
He can't, because listen, I'm gonna tell you, I was a little worried about. I'm not sure we're ready for Dr. James Tour, because it was one debate I looked at where you turned around and went to the chalkboard and it was like DNA drawn on the board. And I'm like, wait, I'm not sure.
Our people, we're going to have to really get the advanced initiates.
That's what I'm saying.
On this episode. And by the way, guys, if y'all are enjoying this episode as we bring these scholars to the platform, drop I am in the chat if you are enjoying this type of episode, as this is something very new that we're introducing to the platform, bringing, these world-renowned scholars. I mean, come on. I mean, Dr. James Tour is one of the hardest scholars to get here.
Right, and
on the platform.
one of very few who actually incorporates faith into his message and his work. So this is huge. This is rare occasion.
It really is. It really is here. One thing I found fascinating before we get to the hotline.
And don't be scared. Matter of fact, Lano, real quick, hit the hotline. They just get regular. Hit the hotline.
Get them warmed up. There you have it.
We are blasting your speakers out today, but do not be scared to come up here and talk to Dr. James Tour. Like I said, once in a lifetime deal. Go ahead, Ty.
Yes. You mentioned that a lot of these guys that are in our schools, in these, which, by the way, many of us have taken these religious studies class, especially of us that went to college. These are people who are agnostic, who are non-believers, and, even a lot of atheists. We're bringing, we got some interesting debates coming this Wednesday, guys. Is polygamy biblical? That's going to be this Wednesday. It is going to be a show this Wednesday at 8 p.m. We also have the atheism in interview, or I would say a debate, also coming to the platform this month, something you guys have been asking us for. A lot of atheists, they pride themselves in being intellectuals, and they use their intellectualism to justify atheism. So why do you think that so many guys that get deep in these religious studies actually just leave faith altogether and decide to go more on the side of being agnostic or atheist?
Well, certainly in secular religion departments, there is that mindset. It's hard to go through many of these institutions. I think if you go in as a believer, I'll give you an example. We have a professor here and in the religion department, and I was talking to him, and I invited him to lunch, and I said, tell me your story. He says, well, I used to be a Baptist evangelist, and a Baptist, and I was an evangelist. And he says, and I went to Harvard Divinity School. I said, oh, stop right there. You went into Harvard believing in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, and you came out not believing. He said, yeah, maybe that was the source of it. So they get into these schools, and they're surrounded by these so-called intellectuals who themselves don't have an experience with God in the sense of having the Bible really speak to them. It's become purely academic. And then they just suck the life out of impressionable young people. And I think that's what goes on. There's very few seminaries or schools of divinity, I should say, schools of divinity at secular universities in this country, where you can go in believing and having a lot of faith and come out believing, having a lot of faith. And the same thing happened to a dear friend of mine. His name was Nabil Qureshi. He was a Muslim who came to faith in the Lord. And I remember he was an evangelist. And then he went to Oxford to get his PhD. And during his PhD, he came back and we were talking. I said, "What have you been reading lately in the Bible?" He says, "Well, I'm reading, this portion." I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, trying to analyze, was this really a later insertion in the Bible?" I said, "What are you talking about? A later insertion?" I mean, you think that he was thinking that Moses didn't even write these first 5 books of the Bible that are attributed to Moses. I said, "Haven't you ever read in the Gospel of John? Jesus even said, he says, 'You don't believe me because you don't believe Moses. Moses wrote of me. Moses wrote of me.'" Jesus substantiated these books to be the books of Moses. Are you going to throw out Jesus too? And he repented right there on my kitchen floor. We got down on our knees and he repented. And even this wonderful evangelist was being drawn astray by this highbrow intelligentsia who's saying all sorts of nonsense. And he looked at this portion in John where Jesus said this. He says, "How come I never noticed this before?" I said, "It's right there. It's right there." Jesus substantiated it. So professors can be extremely influential for good or for bad. And they can take command of a class. And plus students at these ages are highly impressionable. And so it's very easy to draw them. And this is why Charles Spurgeon in the 1800s said, "We have an impressionable generation, so we must impress ourselves upon them." And this is why it's incumbent upon believers, and especially believers in academics, to speak up, to not be silent, and to not have believers shun the academic institutions. They need to be in the secular universities to get these ideas across and to speak life into the life of students, because these are treasures coming in and we dare not lose them.
Wow.
There you have it.
And listen, you gotta be careful going to lunch with Dr. James.
And you got
Like you say.
to you got to be careful going to these universities.
Right.
Because I could absolutely see how, that can happen.
Well, listen, the initials are being shot tonight. We do have one person in the back, which we're going to bring up in just a second. Shout out to Practitioner, her lover and an initiate. She says, "Yes, I love epigenetics and its potential, but we also have to talk about the consequences of pushing forward defective genes. As a scientist, I'm intrigued with how we play God in medicine." And also, shout out to Anna Dominique, says, "I believe those who don't believe but need a certain level of proof will be disqualified in being saved because they never walked in faith." Okay, some very interesting super chats coming in. Listen, y'all should have called in too, by the way, but go ahead and bring that next person up.
We got somebody up. Make sure you turn your cameras on when you're backstage. Turn your cameras on. It looks like my sister has her camera off. Why y'all being shy tonight? And I think is this our moderator? Moderator, you know better than this coming back here. Kosher Leotards is backstage. There we go.
I apologize. Look, we have school tomorrow, and I am getting my daughter prepared for school. So I just wanted to hop in real quick because this was a great conversation, and I'm very excited for him being here tonight.
Incredible. So, by the way, for the people who don't know you, and this is my first time hearing your voice, you have been, let me tell you something, you have been one of the biggest supporters to us in the chat.
Thank you.
For a long time. So we absolutely appreciate and honor you right here, which is why we're going to let you come up here hiding and catfishing us tonight. So go ahead, give us your name, your age, and your location.
So I'm going to stick with Couture Leotards because my job is very personable and I have a lot of clients. No, I do not work in that other industry. I actually do finance.
Okay, good.
Listen, we know you're not on the dark side. Don't worry about that. We know that.
No. I'm 46 years old and I'm originally from Chicago, but I live in the South.
There you have it. What's your question for Dr. James Tour tonight?
Okay, so Dr. James, again, I like so excited that you're here tonight. Very happy that you are sharing your experience from a very different perspective. So my question is, I studied IO psychology in school, and when I was working on my bachelor's degree, I learning about people and how they behave and why they have the behaviors that they have, it actually allowed me to understand the Bible better. So I was able to read the Bible from a human perspective. Why would Abraham go and say, "Yeah, I'll give up my kid for you"? You know, why did David do what he did? But what I wanted to ask you was, I know that college was a while ago for you, but did chemistry, because chemistry has kind of the same foundation of how to research, how to the scientific method, how to come to conclusions, how to even check your own work. Did your chemistry degree help you to understand the Bible better?
I suppose so, in that in that we have to look at what every what every word actually says, and scrutinize it, and really think about what it says. So when you read chemistry, and when you're interpreting data in chemistry, you have to be careful about saying, "Aha, this is it. This is the interpretation," because you may be wrong, and you have to look at other things and get confirming pieces of evidence. And this is this is what the Bible does. I mean, sometimes you think you understand something, and then look at the same story in, say, another gospel, or if you're in the book of Kings, go over to the book of Chronicles and see how it was written about there, and you'll glean more. I think what chemistry's done for me is it's given me a much better appreciation. So, for example, if I look at a leaf out on a tree, I know that there's a magnesium atom sitting in the middle of a porphyrin that photons of light are hitting, and then electrons get spit out, and that's what forms the photosynthesis process, where CO2, carbon dioxide, is being converted into carbon to build the tree, and oxygen for us to breathe. And so when I see a tree, I see much more than just the common person who looks at a tree, because I'm thinking in my mind's eye of the molecular structure that makes that up. Same thing when I'm talking to people. I think about what's happening in their brain, the chemistry that's happening as I'm speaking to them, or the photons of light switching the rhodopsin-like molecules in their eyes from a trans to a cis conformation. And so I'm thinking about other things. So I think that when we learn an academic subject, it actually allows us to have more of an appreciation for life and the beauties of God, that God would make an eye like this, that God would make a leaf like that. It gives me a greater appreciation for God. So yeah, I think education is a great thing, but I also agree that we have to think about our children and what is the best environment for them. Is maybe a Christian school better, because they would be surrounded by other Christians, and then they, if they need to have a more advanced degree in some sort of science or engineering, then after that they can go to a secular university for a graduate school. But we have to watch our children too, because I work in an academic institution, in a secular institution, and sitting in the classroom with some professors might be fairly brutal to some of the things that we want our children to be protected from.
There you have it. Kosher, thank you so much for coming up here asking your questions. Was that all you have for us tonight, sweetheart?
Yes, and again, I'm very appreciative. My molecules are all over the place, doctor.
Oh, good.
Listen, thank you so much. You have a blessed night, okay?
You guys as well.
You too. We appreciate you. We love you.
Yes, we do. I see y'all asking how to be a moderator in the chat. You got to be as consistent as Kosher Leotards. That's what you got to do. You got to go ahead.
I'm here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to be consistent. If we see you guys being active, letting people know what's going on in the chat, dropping these call to actions, we'll go ahead and mod you up over time. But it looks like, let me tell you something. It looks like, I don't know if it's because,
The
we
material.
got the material's a little different here. I got this, I got a world renowned scientist. It can appear like we got this older white guy here teaching us here on the channel. The niche is like, what is going on here tonight? I'd rather just watch before come here and talk. In fact, I want to ask about that because we had a really good conversation, Dr. James Tour. You gave me something I thought was pretty fascinating. I want you to give that to the audience because I asked, in all your years, you've seen Christianity from so many different angles. You've discipled so many people, you've evangelized, you've taught at the highest levels, and you've seen also Christianity in different cultures. And I asked you earlier, but before the show, have you saw that fundamentally there's some different ways that Christians in the African American community believe versus Christians in the white community? And I thought your answer was fascinating. So I want to ask you that here in front of our audience here. What did you see any fundamental differences in how we believe in those different cultures and communities?
Well, what I think is that you certainly in the black community, you certainly have scholarly people and more scholarly people coming on up, and so that's not been a problem, but I view it more as a difference of culture. And so what happens is that when you go to different countries, you see different emphases based on culture. And God, excuse me.
We got to get you some water, Dr. James Tour.
Excuse me about that. Well, I got a reflux problem, so water doesn't help it as much as you would think it helps. But
Understood.
kind of my thorn in the flesh. But what happens is that it's a difference in culture. And so I did prison ministry for 10 years. For 10 years, I was in a maximum security prison every week, every Monday night. And most of the guys that attended my Bible study were blacks. And we built real friendships. But it's interesting. I teach the Bible from more of a scholarly perspective. And they got into it. I mean, it wasn't that they did not have the ability to do that. But then when I would watch them in their own circles, it was more the expression-filled things and the dancing and stuff. And I'm okay with that. And so it's a cultural thing. And I was in a Southern Baptist charismatic church when I lived in South Carolina for 11 years. And it was half of the people there were African American and were blacks. And they were a little bit more on the expression-filled side, but it was more expression. But if it had not been for the black community, the black church, there would probably be no church in this country. And the reason I say that is because that is what was written by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer came to the U.S. in the 1930s, before the start of World War II. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if you've never heard of him, he is one of the greatest intellectuals for the Christian faith from the 20th century, a great Christian intellectual. He was German. He came here to study at one point, and he ended up going back during World War II to work with the church, and he was eventually thrown into prison because of his Christian faith, and he was hung. He was killed by hanging by the Nazis just about a week before the war ended. And a very good book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer was written by Eric Metaxas, who's a great Christian writer, and I would recommend you have Eric Metaxas on your program because he has his own YouTube channel, and he would do a great job. Ask him about Bonhoeffer. But what Bonhoeffer wrote, and this is excellently summarized by Metaxas, is the reason that there would be no church in this country if it were not for the black church is because when he came here, the white church had gotten so intellectual. They had moved up into a phase that's very much like our departments of religion in academics, that they've moved away from Jesus and the experience of Jesus working in your life to everything was just textbook and afar off now. And he says it got so devoid of faith, it was just based upon all this intellectualism, that there was no relating to God anymore. And so when he was in the U.S., he was working, I think, for a while at King's College in New York City. He would just go to the African churches, to the African American churches, to the black churches, and there's where he would fellowship. And he enjoyed their singing, he enjoyed their closeness, and he found them also able to run at the intellectual level. That was not a problem for them, yet they had not lost the depth of relationship. And so he credits the black church for keeping the only semblance of the power of God in a person's life. And I think that you can get too far to the extreme on either side or the other. And it's good. It's good that we have both of these. You need to have the apologetics, where you can give a defense for our faith that causes it to be able to stand. You need to have the archaeologists that are digging up these stones and showing, hey, where these things happen, the people with the coins, all of this. And so the black church has been critical, not just good for the church in the United States, but critical for its survival has been the black church.
Man, that's an incredible. That's really an incredible piece of history that I have never heard.
Likewise.
And I'm shocked that even among black scholars that hasn't been pointed out, at least not within my knowledge or research. One thing I'm curious about is, because obviously we know the history of the country and why there was even a black church, in the first place. But this is outside your expertise at this point as we're winding down. I'm just curious, just to kind of get a feel for your thoughts, Dr. James Tour. But do you think at any point in time there's a possibility that you can see an integration of the church? Or do you think there will always be a black church and a white church for the duration of our time here in the States?
Like I said, the church that I was in South Carolina, about half the church was black. And that's why my wife and I went there. We were so moved by seeing a church that was half black, half white. And it was exactly the demographic of the city that we lived in. And there were some whites that didn't feel real comfortable there, not because black people were there, but because of just the way the blacks expressed themselves in worship. There were some blacks there, the blacks that would come that didn't feel comfortable. I don't think it was because there were whites, but there was other parts of worship and the way the Bible was taught that they weren't as much used to. So I saw an example of it. And it worked. And in fact, it was fun. It was fun to have it this way. And we enjoyed having it this way. And in fact, my wife is not white. My wife is not black. My wife is brown. She is, her family harkens from the Indian subcontinent. And so we would joke about this, that my wife would used to say that she's halfway between. And but I didn't even think of people as black and white. One of my best friends today is a black man, and I don't think of it, hey, he's black. I mean, he's just my friend. He's just my friend. I mean, we go to the same church and we love each other, and I pray for him. I send him a text message prayer every morning, and he sends me a text message prayer back every morning. I wake up a little bit earlier than he does, but I pray for him every morning. So yeah, I think it's going to come together, and I think it can work. I'm saddened by, sometimes I think the government has pushed us apart. That if they just leave us alone, that we in many ways do much better.
Man, strong. Honestly, man, thank you so much, Dr. James. This whole conversation, has really been something to a lot of new perspectives that many people may not have heard.
It's fascinating.
You know, absolutely fascinating. A really great conversation to cement your faith in different ways that you may not even know that your faith needed or could be cemented. So great perspective. And I thank you so much for coming up on here and joining us. I want everybody to know that if you would like to go and see Dr. James Tour's YouTube channel, he's growing it. He's building it. It's one of the most unique YouTube channels I've ever seen. It's an intersection of faith, of science, of chemistry like you've never seen before. It's growing, and it's absolutely a well of knowledge that I'm happy that we were able to bring to you for just this 2-hour piece here on Hardly Initiated. So thank you again, Dr. James Tour,
Big facts.
for joining us here tonight.
Drop fan in the chat. All my initiates, drop fan in the chat if you have just became a fan of Dr. James Tour.
Absolutely. Absolutely, guys. I want to let you guys know, please, I need everybody here that's watching to subscribe to the channel. It is very important that you continue to subscribe. This is how we get world-renowned scientists on the platform, guys. This is how we get the scholars.
This is what makes us look legit.
It makes us look legit when we got these subscribers on the platform here. So I ask that you continue to subscribe and support every single way. Thank you to every member, every initiate to the channel. We do not overlook that. Those people with the badges there, especially the purple badges. I think the purple badge is the highest the badge can go.
I think it's the highest level right now.
At this point in the
18
chat.
months, like 18 months.
About 18 months. We
Yeah.
absolutely thank you. And trust me, we're going to do something very special. Me and Ron are always planning. We told you this Wednesday, we have a big debate coming up that we want everybody to be bright and early on time for 8 p.m. Biblical polygamy. Is it biblical? All right, we're going to have a great conversation this Wednesday and really for the rest of this month. This is just a taste of what we're bringing you. But I want to ask Dr. James Tour, man, before we let you go, is there any final words you want to give the audience before we go ahead and send you out send you about your way?
Yeah, there is something. If you don't believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, you can send me an email to tour@drjamestour.org, and I will gladly meet with you. We'll set up a Zoom conversation. Let me tell you about the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. And people don't believe that I do this, but I spend hours and hours every week, one-on-one with people, going over the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, because this is what you need to have to be saved. And so I invite you to do this tour at drjamestour.org, and we'll get together. And this is not for Christians, please. If you already believe this, don't. This is not for you, because I got to devote these hours to the unbelievers. And if you just want to talk about other things, I'm sorry, I just can't do it on an individual basis. But if you don't believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, let us get together, because I want to see you saved. I want to see you enjoy Jesus like I enjoy him.
Incredible.
That is incredible.
That's an amazing offer.
That is an amazing offer.
So
to go ahead and get free one-on-one coaching right there
right,
from Dr.
right.
James
For
Tour.
you don't believe. So that's amazing. Thank you, Dr. James Tour. And just I want to give shout outs to people that's, everybody that's supporting the platform, donating to the platform. That really means a lot. I found the name of the gentleman, Cameron Keeneland. Shout out to Cameron for purchasing 24 orders of the Fight the Flesh bracelet, guys. I literally rock mine every day, guys. I literally rock it every day. I feel unequipped when I don't have it, because at this point it's become a part of my psychology, because it literally reminds me of all of the things I need to stay away from.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're doing this. So,
Stay strapped.
That's it. That's
and
it.
Hey, fun fact, guys. We actually got somebody that just popped up backstage real quick. Let's go ahead and take this very last one before we let Dr. James Tour go here. I'm so sorry, Dr. James Tour. Can we take
No, that's right. Look, I'm used to this. People are afraid to ask questions of professors. I mean, I understand. It happens all the time. They get intimidated. They don't ask. So I understand.
Thank you so much. Let's bring Practitioner Her here to the stage. Practitioner Her, what's up with you,
hold
sister?
on. This is the very first time you joined us live, right?
You
Wait, take off
unmuted.
mute.
You got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Very first time she's joined us live, and she's like one of the most high rankingest Initiate. She's been with us since
fr-
day
from
one.
the beginning of us actually doing this show. Practitioner Her has been active in the community. So thank you so much. Welcome to the initiation hotline.
I appreciate y'all bringing me up. At the end, he said he really wanted to talk to people who were mostly non-believers. So I'm not sure he wants to address my question, but I'll just throw it out there. And if you want to answer, that'll be greatly
Well,
appreciated.
first off, give me your name, your age, and your location.
Hi, I'm Renisha. I live here in Houston. I'm dressed like this because we are actually preparing for a winter apocalypse. So, yeah,
No,
I'm coming in from Houston. 37. Is that?
There you
Did
go.
I get everything?
You got it.
it.
What's your question?
Shoot.
Awesome. I am a nurse practitioner, nurse midwife myself, and I love how science meets religion. Recently dive into the book by Francis S. Collins, The Language of God. And I'm very interested in what do you think about religion as it pertains when religion meets humanity. For example, we're being taught that our genes, they're encoded to tell us about our story, our history. Our genes can tell us whether we have certain diseases, whether we're predisposed to certain ailments and mental health issues. I'm interested in whether you believe that life is predetermined, and if so, where do we draw the line on morality and genetics?
Yeah, there are many things in our life that are determined. I'm short. I would love to be, a few inches taller. I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. That's been determined by my genes, and so there's some things that I can't change, and that was determined. As far as other things, God knows everything. God knows everything. That's part of the definition of God. So he knows where we're going to be and what we're going to do long before it ever happened. At the same time, the Bible talks about free will. So there are things that are already determined. There's some free will within that. Sometimes I use the analogy of a 3-year-old in a home. A 3-year-old in a home may have free reign of the whole home, but you don't go out that front door. I'm not going to let you just walk out that door. I'm not going to let you climb out the window. You can be here in the home. So there is freedom for us, but the freedom is within certain boundaries, and there are things that we can do that affect our health. There are things that we can do that make our health better. So we have certain parameters. And then there's other parameters that we just can't mess with. Only God has defined that. And that's the barrier. That's what we
And
can
those
do.
are the parameters that I'm more interested in those cases where we don't have the ability to self-regulate.
Yeah, and there are clearly things like that. God has set certain boundaries for us, and he doesn't let us pass those. And one of those has traditionally been genetically, but I mean, scientists are pushing the boundaries now, and hopefully we can do things for good with this. And like I said, other people will do dastardly things, but the Bible speaks of both. The Bible speaks of things being predetermined, and the Bible speaks of free will. It has both of them. And as Charles Spurgeon said, I never try to reconcile them because they are both there, and I've accepted in my own mind that they are both there, and I don't have to reconcile things that have never had a conflict between them. God has put them both there, and this is one of the things I put in the hands of God, and I say, God, you're in charge of this. I don't really know where these things meet, but I trust you. I trust you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm in Houston too, and I got to get ready for this snow that's coming in because I lived up in Syracuse, New York. I lived up in Wisconsin, but snow and Houston don't go together. So I want to be home when the snow starts falling.
Yeah, infrastructure, we're not built for it. I
Not built for
appreciate
it.
it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank Thank you all for having me up last minute.
Absolutely. Listen, we appreciate you. You're one of our favorites, and yeah, I'm just glad that you finally joined us live. We need you all the time.
Yeah. Appreciate it. I'll make it a habit.
Absolutely.
All right, y'all have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
y'all.
Good night. Good night. I see you had
Hey,
to see.
Ryan, I can tell you one big difference between the black community and the white community.
What's that?
You can ask a woman to say her age. We get in big trouble for that.
Oh, listen, no, it's the same in the black community. But me and Ty, we got a special way to special relationship with the ladies.
We've established a culture here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
trust
okay.
me, it's the same. It is the same.
Definitely.
But let me tell you, Dr. James Tour, thank you so much again for coming up here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and nerding out with us tonight.
I'm telling you, and then we got blessed by two of our favorite initiates calling in, so that was really cool to
Really
get a chance
special.
to see them on the platform live. That was dope.
No, it's super special, guys. Thank you so much here for tuning in. Again, every Monday and Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we are here for you. And if you want to join us on our brand new channel, Hardly in Love, our dating activation channel, that's every Tuesday and Thursday night, also at 8 p.m. So 8 p.m. All you got to do is type in Hardly in Love Dating and you'll find us. Or you can just go ahead and click the link here in the description. And for those who have been here since the beginning of the channel, I was telling, Dr. James Tour, this started off as a dating and relationship channel where we were really searching to find answers for our families, for our communities. And we saw that these problems, they're not material solutions, guys. They're spiritual solutions. So as we went ahead and we went deeper and deeper in faith, we went all the way to Dr. James Tour. All right? So in order to keep the dating alive, we bringing you guys Hardly in Love, an all new spinoff. And speaking of Hardly in Love, if you don't have the Hardly in Love card deck, it is 100 prompt open-ended question deck that will explode any game night, date night, family night, late night, whatever it is. You'll have an incredible time. So that's also in the description. But every Tuesday and Thursday night, join us at Hardly in Love. But you already know how we do it. Hardly Initiated. We are out.